Hello everybody, it's Mr. Stevens back again with another foray into Brothers in Arms, the lives and experiences of the men who fought the Civil War in their own words by William C. Davis. We are going to jump right back into where we left off in the last video, which is Chapter 4. And Chapter 4 is called The Leaders and the Lead. I hope you guys are still enjoying this read. We'll just keep plugging away on it. And without further ado, The Leaders and the Lead. With the exception of the pitiful few hundred old Army officers available in 1861, no one north or south knew or understood command. All of the volunteer officers had to learn it, and the experience came hard to many. There were no schools to teach them. Frantically, they read the latest drill manuals, sometimes writing the orders on slips of paper, then reading them at practice the next day, hoping the wind did not blow them away. Inevitably, they gave orders out of sequence, confusing themselves and their equally inexperienced troops. That the men got into a snarl, a tangle, a double, and twisted, inextricable tactical knot is a tame delineation, confessed one. The drill caused a great deal of serious reflection. Then there was learning to do the paperwork, filling forms to get the men fed, clothed, and paid. In the end, only experience, trial, and error turned men into leaders and revealed those who were not. My post is no sinecure. My hands are full, perfectly full. I have no hope of being a popular captain. I am only trying to make a good one. No one can imagine the amount of work required of an officer as green as I am in tactics. Outside Petersburg in 1865, Pennsylvanian volunteers rest while their officers await further orders. Published at the very beginning of the war, the Confederacy's Book of Dress Regulations for its officers set a standard that men in the field were seldom able to achieve. The regimental colors of the 18th U.S. Infantry. I wish to God one half of our officers were knocked in the head by slinging them against a part of those still left. Some men chosen to command simply never measured up to the task. Many could not take the pressure of their new job, the disapproval of the men, or the contempt of other better officers. Others found themselves repelled by the dirt and squalor and the crudeness of army life, not to mention the company they had to keep. One Texan described a major who gave up his commission, saying that if he had to associate with devils, he would wait till he went to hell where he would select his own company. Some unfit officers stayed with the armies, doing irreparable harm. Cowardice, drunkenness, and neglect made their men suffer unnecessarily and contributed toward poor morale. There is a great deal of dissatisfaction with the captain, said an Illinois private. He is so bigoted that he will not learn anything, and he cannot drill half as good as the men, and the other commissioned officers are not much better. When the best officers sometimes had trouble controlling soldiers, bad officers could turn even good men into a bad regiment. Fancy engraved pistols in presentation cases were strictly the province of the officers, from the Colt Navy 36 at left to the more exotic Adams import next to it. Very few, however, carried something like the Savage North 36 below right. Several officers of the Union Armies of the Potomac posed casually beside a field piece. They too observed an indifference to dress that reflected their individuality. I think I am under one of the best captains in the world, a soldier of the 1st Kentucky Brigade, CSA. For every bad officer in the armies, many good ones emerged. For one thing, the first regiments to join the colors were in for 1 year enlistments only. When those soldiers re-enlisted for 3 years or the war, they had learned something about what they needed in commanders and showed much better judgment in the officers they elected the second time around. Moreover, state governors learned too and gave their appointments for field ranks to better qualified men who had already proven themselves. And of course, experience had been a great teacher. Natural leaders gradually emerged, men like Joshua Chamberlain of the 20th Maine or John B. Gordon of the 6th Alabama, whose men would and did follow them into the cannon's mouth. Such officers looked after their paperwork, which was in effect looking after the men. They led from the front rank, and off the battlefield made the privates' concerns their own. It was no wonder that such officers usually started out as company lieutenants and captains, inevitably found promotion to senior rank, and with it, the enduring respect and affection of their men. Colonel Ambrose Burnside, as he appeared as commander of the 1st Rhode Island. Looking every inch the soldier, Burnside inspired his men and gave the confidence of politicians in Washington until he rose in rank and failed disastrously as commander of the Army of the Potomac. The uniform frock coats of the Union First Lieutenant, a colonel of the 118th Connecticut, and a colonel of the 169th New York. They show the wide variation in officers' uniforms. Officers were men and boys too, and they could abuse their rank and misbehave just as surely as any private, only the man with rank stood a better chance of getting away with it. Their besetting sin was drunkenness. It could extend from merely being inebriated on the drill field to intoxication on the battlefield. One Yankee officer got himself cashiered when he became so drunk at an officer's mess that he stood on the table and relieved himself on the food. Then, too, gambling lured them, and they had more to wager than their soldiers, nor were they immune to the baser urges served by camp followers. Some officers kept prostitutes with them in their quarters, and even a few generals, like Yankee Judson Kilpatrick and Joseph Hooker, became notorious for their indiscretions. Perhaps worst of all were the thieves. As the armies rapidly expanded and their supply requirements soared, so the temptation to make a personal profit from the soldiers' needs grew. Men in charge of army bureaucracy could embezzle, and a few did, most notably General Justice McKinstry, who extorted bribes from contractors supplying goods to the Union Army and was cashiered for his crime. There is a great deal of dissatisfaction about our colonel that they don't like him at all. I han't got no use for him. He is always drunk when he can get whiskey. Officers had the kind of responsibility that could allow them to betray their trusts. Commissaries, like the man in charge of this bakery, could cheat the men and the army in quality of goods in order to profit personally. General Joseph Hooker was famous for his inappropriate conduct with women and drink. He was to resign his army command in 1864. With the dog tag a thing of the future, men and officers carried stencils and identity discs that they should purchase on their own. If there is one thing that I hate more than another, it is the sight of a soldier's shoulder strap. For I am well convinced in my own mind that had it not been for officers like this war would have ended long ago. It is rare in any army or any war that the enlisted man does not, one time or another, disparage his officers, if for nothing more than the fact that they are his officers. Johnny Reb and Billy Yank made it clear early on that they would yield their independence only grudgingly and award their respect with equal reluctance. Damning their officer became part of their campfire pastime, and some were remarkably imaginative about it. They applied all manner of epithets to their leaders, from bugger and dog to greenhorn, skunk, and whorehouse pimp. But the all-time favorite was the classic son of a bitch. One soldier declared his colonel an ignoramus fit for nothing higher than the cultivation of corn, while a Reb from Florida pronounced his officers not fit to tote guts to a bear. So long as they kept those opinions to themselves, the private soldiers had little to fear. While men may have cursed their regimental officers, they rarely had anything but praise for the likes of these men. In pursuit of Lee's army in Northern Virginia, a council of war at Massaponax Church in 1864, General U.S. Grant leans over the bench at left studying a map with General George G. Meade, while officers of their staff look on. Typical Confederate artillery officers' uniform items: jackets, shirts, gauntlets, holsters and belts, sabers, binoculars, and more were the usual effects worn and carried by commanders of the big guns. You order me? You ain't worth a pinch of shit. You kiss my arse, you goddamn louse. An unidentified Union soldier. From time to time, there were soldiers who could not keep their resentment of officers under rein. When this happened, trouble was bound to ensue. Insubordination took many forms, and much of it was induced by drinking. Most of all, soldiers simply talked back to their officers or hurled insults at them. Shithouse adjutant, they yelled, or old puke, or illiterate ass. More active insubordination came in refusing to obey an order, and sometimes that resulted in the most outright rebellion, striking an officer. A punch or a kick or even a shove was a severe breach of military law, but some soldiers could not restrain themselves. One Yankee threw a heavy iron grape shot at his colonel, narrowly missing him. A captain who insulted a picket guard found himself pulled from his horse and thoroughly beaten, while an army inspector who threatened some soldiers with his sword was pulled from his mount and severely battered. At the most extreme, a soldier might draw a weapon, rifle, or sword and threaten an officer with it. If he stopped short of striking, he was fortunate, for penalties could be swift and summary. Officers had to be careful of the insubordinate soldiers, for among other things, he had been trained to kill, and he carried weapons like this sword, bayonet, and the Model 1841 Mississippi rifle above, or the Sharps rifle below. A typical field quarters for the regimental officers showed a little more comfort than that enjoyed by the enlisted ranks, including camp beds, tables, and chairs. The responsibility of command had some compensations. And we will stop there for the day. I hope you guys are still enjoying this. We will be back shortly with the next video, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.